You are listening to Any Given Sunday, a part of the Dead End Podcast Network. Please subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, and all other podcasting services. Please make sure you check out Dead End Hip Hop, Dead End Sports, Dead End Gaming, Is the Mic Still On, Chris Platt's Strictly Hip Hop and Hoops Talk, and a host of other shows on our podcast network. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show. Yo, welcome back to another episode of Any Given Sunday for Sunday, February 24th, 2019. I am your host, Manny Brown. What's up, everyone? Hopefully you guys had a happy, safe, blessed week. My guest this week is a fellow Blue Devil fan, brings a unique experience to the table. He is someone who attended the Duke University, graduated in 2004. Mr. Donald Wine, you may have heard of him before. He is the co-host of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. He also contributes on SB Nation, also writes for Stars and Stripes FC. He's all over the place. The Duke Basketball Report podcast, one of the best college basketball podcasts out there, one of the best Duke solely podcasts out there. So check it out. It's available anywhere you can find podcasts: iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, anywhere. So first time on the show. I've been wanting to talk to this guy for a while. I think he brings a unique insight to the show, and I'm glad that he's here. Mr. Donald Wine, what's going on, man? Welcome to Any Given Sunday.
It's good to be here. Thanks for the invitation. And we're still shocked. We just recorded our 150th episode. We're still shocked that people call our podcast popular. So thank you for that.
Awesome, man. No, you guys do an awesome job. If you guys have not listened, obviously it's a Duke podcast. So if you're a Duke hater out there, it might not appeal to you. But for those Dukies out there that like myself and others who listen and want good Duke podcasts, it's definitely one of the best out there. So check it out for sure. But I wanted to have you on because obviously this was a big week, round one of Duke UNC, and obviously the whole Zion situation popped off on Thursday night. But before we get into that, anytime I have a guest on the show, I just kind of want to have them introduce themselves to the audience that may not be aware of them, may not know them. Just kind of give your background, a brief bio, just how long have you been a Duke fan? I know you're a Duke alum, so just kind of get into that a little bit, kind of let the audience know who Donald is.
Yeah, absolutely. Donald Wine here. Nice to meet everybody out there on your side of the world. I graduated from Duke in 2004. Funny thing about me, I grew up outside Detroit, Michigan. I'm not one of those lifelong Duke fans. I grew up a Michigan fan in my youth. I still am a Michigan fan. But when it comes to Duke, I started following them. I went to school with Shane Battier, high school. And when he committed to the Duke Blue Devils, I started following his career and started following the team, and really became a fan when I, went to school there. It's easy to fall in love with a team once you step on campus and realize that it is the thing to follow in college. And since then, I've been one of those people where life stops for basketball games and football games. I worked for the football team when I was in school. I was the leader of the Krzyzewskiville my senior year. And one of the thrills of my life is just being a Duke Blue Devil. So I do that. I've done the Duke Basketball Report podcast for about 4 years now. As I mentioned, we just recorded episode 150, which is something that me and my co-host thought was unheard of when we first started, but it's cool to be doing this 4 years later and still having fun doing it. Outside of Duke, I'm a huge soccer fan, and it really active in that space with a couple of supporters groups, and also on SB Nation on a couple of websites, Stars and Stripes FC, where I'm the co-manager, and blackandredunited.com. So, and I also write for Duke Basketball Report on occasion, but mostly run their social media and help with the podcast and the Duke Basketball Report forum. So that's where you can find me. And really, I'm just out there in the sports space, commenting and just really taking in everything, because sports is really one of the passions of my life, and it's something that I follow daily.
Awesome. So you guys have an insider. This guy knows Duke very well. So it's good to have an insight from someone, because there's one thing to cover them, just be a normal media person, but you went to the school, the environment, the culture. So it's an added bonus of having someone on that kind of has that experience as well as covering them as well. So awesome, man. Awesome. I'm glad we got a chance to talk to you today. So
yeah, absolutely. And that I like that there's different perspectives out there, because people kind of get wrapped up in their bubbles, and it's cool to even branch out, even for me, branching out from my podcast to come on your podcast is an honor, because I want to be able to provide that perspective and get perspective of someone that, doesn't necessarily integrate in the space that we're in from time to time. So that's really good. I'm glad you're covering it.
No, awesome. I'm a huge Duke fan, and I live and die with it. I'm like you. Game day stop at the household. My wife rolls her eyes occasionally, but
she still hasn't learned yet. I mean,
she does a good job of trying to support the passion. Yeah. It's only when I go crazy, like games like Thursday night, where it's just very frustrating that she.
Oh yeah, that she'll never get used to it, and frankly, it's fine. We'll have to deal with that.
I know, right? So yeah, let's get into Thursday night, man. What was it? 30 seconds into the game, and Zion goes down. What were your initial thoughts? I mean, I'm assuming just like every Duke fan, you held the collective breath as you saw Zion go down. So what were your initial thoughts when he first got hurt and everything that kind of followed?
Well, so I saw the play immediately, and I saw that he had blown through his shoe immediately. It wasn't, how some people probably didn't see it until they saw the slow motion replay.
Right.
But when it happened, I saw it in real time and was just saying, "Oh no, oh no, oh no," just over and over and over. That was obviously something that, and for those of you out there, you've heard the hype about this game, about Duke UNC, but this was on a level unlike, many people had seen in quite a long time. It was, all eyeballs were on there, on the teams, on Zion, on RJ Barrett, on all these guys, on UNC. They were talking about this game. That hype and that bubble just burst when Zion's, shoe exploded, and with it, his right knee got injured. And I think that is what took a lot of the wind out of the sails of not just the team, but all of Cameron. I mean, Zion is a once in a generation player. I know you out there have heard that many times for different players over the years, but I mean it when I say Zion is a once in a generation type of player. And we wanted to see what he could do in the biggest rivalry in college sports. And to see that happen 30 seconds in the game was such a freak accident thing. Really just, I think it just shocked everybody in the gym, including the players. And the only people that it didn't shock were the 15 or so guys wearing UNC blue.
Yeah. No, it was definitely like a gut punch. It definitely kind of just cast a cloud over the game. It just never felt like the team was right after it. It never felt like the environment, the fans, everybody was just it just felt like the whole night everybody was like, yeah, I know we're watching the game, but what about Zion? Like, is he hurt? It just kind of felt like that.
You nailed it.
Yeah, interesting enough, I didn't, I saw it in real time, but I didn't see that he broke through his shoe initially. I just kind of like, oh man, he slipped through a wet spot. And instantly I'm just like, oh my God, did he hurt his knee? Did he tear an ACL? The gamut of emotions just kind of runs through your head. And then, obviously we see the shoe break, and then that just kind of adds, a whole added layer of lore to it. It's interesting because I didn't, at first, kind of saw it, and then I went back and watched the replay. I kind of rewound it and saw it, and then I was like, okay. And then I see him kind of walk off under his own power. So I'm like, okay, he's okay. I didn't think, kind of after everything kind of settled down, the emotions of everything kind of settled down. I'm like, okay, he's walking off under his own power. He's getting checked out. I'm thinking, okay, they'll probably hold him out for the half, and then he'll come back in the second half. And then, I think it was still in the first half when they announced he was kind of done for the game. That kind of had me a little concerned, like, okay, what's going on? And maybe they're being precautious. But of course, you're watching the game, and you're kind of trying to shift your focus to one aspect, which is the game itself, and then trying to figure out what's going on with Zion. So were you kind of in that same boat as well?
Yeah, and you nailed it. When I said you nailed it in the sense that, I'm watching the game with my two best friends, and we're sitting there saying, this is weird in the sense that this game is no longer the most important thing right now. We're all on Twitter. We're all, just looking on the internet, scouring for news about Zion's knee. And, so during the first half, during commercial breaks, we're finding out stuff from people who are in the arena, and are able to comment on things that the broadcast is not able to comment about because their main thing is to call the game. And so there's a lot of news outlets out there that had journalists at the game that were really the ones that were providing the backbone of the news that we were receiving about, Zion's family being there and his dad being called into into the locker room, and then him coming out to retrieve his mom, things like that. Nolan Smith going into the locker room, coming back, shaking his head when confronted by John Shire about the situation. And of course, no one's hearing what's being said, but just everyone knew when Nolan comes back to the bench and they know they're talking about Zion, he just simply shakes his head. Everyone in the gym and everyone on Twitter is just like, what is going on here? Is this a thing where he's done for the game, or is this something where we saw the last of Zion Williamson? And again, like you said, the range of emotions all supersede the fact that we were talking about a player's the fate of a player and what would happen to him, and not the biggest game of the year that was going on in front of our eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the game, as soon as that happened, the game just kind of felt secondary in nature. So obviously we've had a couple days to kind of digest it, and we know obviously what the diagnosis is: mild knee sprain, listed as day to day. Just kind of guesstimate, and I know you're not a doctor, obviously, so just kind of play doctor for a second, and just kind of, when do you feel or think that Coach K, because I think they're going to be very cautious with him. Obviously, they know he's very important, and they want to make sure that he's ready to play when he's ready to play, and obviously everything that goes around with having Zion, obviously his NBA prospects and all that. So I think they're going to be extra cautious with him. So when do you see him finally making his return to the court? Let's bury that right now. He is coming back. He will play.
He's coming back. Yeah. There's no all the talk about him shutting it down is just dumb.
Before we get into the diagnosis, and sorry to cut you off, but let's talk about that. Like, talk about that. Were you kind of rolling your eyes in the last couple of days with everything that's coming out as far as whether Zion should play and all the talking heads out there? Were you kind of shaking your head just like I was about the whole Zion thing? And where do you kind of stand on the whole, should he play, should he not play?
Zion should do what Zion wants to do. That's my stance on it. And everyone who was talking about it one way or the other was not taking that into account, especially the people who were talking about him shutting it down. This kid clearly loves college. He clearly loves being with his team. He was one of the biggest recruiters for a lot of these guys that came in on this freshman class. They all had been chatting together about wanting to play together and try and win a national championship at Duke University, not anywhere else. So that's part of it. But also when you just talk about the fact that there's a lot of self-serving going on and people saying that Zion should shut it down, right? I'm sure Knick fans out there are like, this guy should never play another second of basketball again. All Duke haters are saying that too, because they don't want to see this guy come back, because they know when he comes back, Duke is the best team in the country. Without him, that's a question mark. So there's always that. But also I go back to previous examples. We talk about Ben Simmons when he shut it down. A few years ago when he was at LSU. LSU didn't even make the tournament. And people said that he was selfish for shutting it down and not trying to lead a program that had not seen success, a lot of success previous to that, to try and lead them to the NCAA tournament and play on that big stage where he could have made a lot more money. Now, obviously, he went number one. He is every bit as good as people said he was going to be, and has proven that so far in his young NBA career. We also see Michael Porter last year. Michael Porter Jr., he sat out for most of the year, came back right just before the tournament. He did. Obviously Missouri didn't play well. I believe they lost in the first round, but when he came back, people were like, that's a great teammate. He's coming back to see what he can do and showcase himself in the process. And now with Zion all of a sudden coming back is the worst thing that could possibly ever happen to college basketball and to basketball in general. And I think that's kind of disingenuous. So I think of course, as a Duke fan, I want Zion to come back. And I think he's going to. They've already announced that whenever he's healthy, he's going to play. But at the end of the day, Zion has to do what is best for him. And no one was taking that into account when they were discussing all of this. And I think that's the real sad part of it.
Yeah, I agree with you completely that there's definitely a lot of self-serving going on, a lot of agendas being played there. Of course, I just kind of got frustrated because no one even knew the official diagnosis before there's already articles and First Take and Undisputed. They're debating. I'm like, we don't even know what his official diagnosis is. And right. And after the game and kind of watching Coach K's post game and everything, kind of in the aftermath, I knew that it wasn't like ultimately serious. Like I knew it wasn't an ACL. Obviously he walked off on his own power. I didn't see Coach K, terribly worried about it. So I instantly, that kind of put me at ease. Like, okay, they don't think it's like super serious. It's more of just kind of, hey, let's be precautious here. Let's not get crazy with it. I almost bet that if this was, maybe an NBA playoff game and he had to play, or a seventh game, I think he probably could have came back and played. I don't know that. I'm not a doctor, obviously, but I think if it was a big enough game, maybe a national championship game, maybe he plays. I kind of got that feeling that it wasn't serious enough where, this guy just can't move. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that was definitely a lot of agendas being fed there. But I just kind of felt like it was just a lot of the Duke bias or hate at play. I think it was a lot of people. And the thing that really frustrated me though was the NBA players, like, oh, the NCAA is BS, or, oh, Zion just quit now. And no, but I'm like, it's easy for you guys to play. You guys are cashing in a $8 million check as we speak. Like,
right.
It's very easy from another perspective to say what another kid should do. So I don't know. I just kind of got a little frustrated, but
yeah, it was definitely frustrating because that it took away the talk from, a lot of things, but really, I mean, we even had to talk about the shoe, and Paul George had to call Nike to explain the situation because it was PG 2.5 that he was wearing. Like, I mean, come on now. Like, Paul George was an all-star break, and he was trying to get back to leading the Oklahoma City Thunder, and he has to call Nike to talk about his basketball shoe. Like, come on, guys.
Yeah, it just, and the whole Nike thing got I mean, it's a freak incident. I mean, sheesh. Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's not like 45 other players in the country had the same thing happen to them at the exact same time. Like, okay, that would kind of raise some eyebrows, but it was one of those freak things. It literally happens like once in a blue moon. So yeah, the whole thing, but I get it. It's Zion, a lot of hype, a lot of media attention. Obviously you saw the resale value for these games. So this was a sporting event more so than just a game. This was a pop culture event in a lot of ways. And so I think that was kind of par for the course, the whole backlash or the whole kind of hype after the game with Zion. But I actually, before we got into the criticism or the narrative about Zion not playing, when did you feel like Zion would be ready to play? Just kind of putting on your doctor's hat, even though I know you're not a doctor. Just kind of put your doctor hat on for a second and just kind of predict or guess, when do you think he'll be fully ready to go?
Well, so, yesterday against Syracuse, he was on the bench and, he was very active. He was very animated. He was limping, but he was definitely jumping around when we had good plays. He was running out to greet his teammates on timeouts and really, and just being a positive presence on the bench. And I think that gave me a little bit of comfort because it seems like he's not, what's the word? He's in a state where he's close.
Right.
It was probably held out just as a precaution. Looking at the schedule, I mean, we only have 4 regular season games left. I imagine that we're looking at either next weekend against Miami or a week from Tuesday against Wake Forest, as a prime time for him to come back. Those games are in Cameron, and really it's about, you have to think of it 2 ways. One, you want him to be 100%. You want to make sure he's 100%, but also with regards to the team, the team will at that point have become used to playing without him in a way. And you have to kind of reintegrate the offense again and give him a couple weeks to get really to 100% where everyone's clicking again. You want to have that. And honestly, I think, I guarantee you that he wants another crack at UNC. He wants to be able to play it in that game in the Dean Dome on March 10th. So I think that's really the goal here. Whether he comes back before then is anybody's guess. But really, I think the game that I almost guarantee you would put money on that he will be playing in is that game at the Dean Dome, because I think he wants a crack at those guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. I kind of circled on my phone here the Wake Forest game on Tuesday the 5th. I think they'll probably play him that game. I think it might be a situation where they probably don't start him. They kind of ease him back slowly, try to get him some minutes before the UNC game. I think definitely he will be back. I'm not a doctor. So if everything stays the same, he stays all right, everything progresses well, then I think he'll definitely be back by that UNC game, the second UNC game. But I'm kind of circling Wake Forest. It's a home game, last home game of the year, senior night. I think that's a good game to kind of ease him back in, get him ready, get his minutes up.
And Wake is not good. So
right, that's another added bonus. Yes,
that's a way to get somebody to ease back into an offense against Wake Forest.
Yeah. Plus, I also kind of and I was just kind of scouring through Twitter that night, and just kind of getting a lot of different perspectives. I saw somebody, I can't remember the person that tweeted it, but Bagley last year had kind of a similar injury. And he missed, I think it was like 3 or 4 games and came back and there was no ill effects to it. So, so just kind of circling at, if he misses the Wake game, if he comes back at the Wake game, that's 3 games missed. So maybe he might miss the Wake game. So no, but I think definitely one of those 2 games is clearly a possibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about the UNC game, because it's kind of a shame that in all of the Zion thing, it's like, oh yeah, we had a game that was played. How much do you want? I mean, obviously they won yesterday against a tough Syracuse team who always plays us tough, especially at the Carrier Dome. But before we kind of get into that game, just how much attention do you pay into that loss? It was a 16-point defeat. Do you want to base most of that on kind of the lull that was stricken on the team by the Zion loss, or do you just there's some things that concern you with that defeat, or kind of break down the game as a whole?
Well, I mean, without Zion in the game, we had no answer for UNC in the paint. They scored 62 points in the paint. That's a stupid number that should never happen in any game, and I think that was really based on just the whole shock of everything. I mean, as the team learned that Zion wasn't coming back, as the crowd learned that Zion wasn't coming back, that just took the wind out of everything in Cameron. So I attribute it to be, and UNC wasn't phased. They went out, they played a great game. They shot the ball well inside. They were terrible from 3-pointer, but when you have 62 points in the paint, it doesn't really matter. And they had no answer for like Cam Johnson, Luke May, those type of guys. So that's something that it's not necessarily concerning, but it takes solace in the fact that the next day, after that game, factoring in a game with a team without Zion Williamson, they still had Duke as the number 1 overall seed in the tournament if it were to start on Thursday. So I think that what they're saying is, yeah, we get it. It was a fluke game, a freak injury happened, and that really was the reason that they lost by so much, and it was a shock to the system. So I think you saw with the team against Syracuse, they learned how to play without Zion a little bit inside. They knuckled down on that part of the game in perspective. So I think that really gives me comfort that this team can adapt. We adapted for a game without Trey Jones. We lost him during that last Syracuse game. The next game we had on the agenda was UVA, and we ended up winning that game without him. So we've learned how to win without our stars, but the games that we have had, we've only had one full strength loss. That was that game back in November against Gonzaga. And that was after 3 games in 3 days. So I feel comfortable about where we are, even without Zion in the lineup. You just gotta tighten up on some things.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I agree with you. The only thing that would concern me is just kind of this, it's interesting with this team, as we've watched them all year, their shooting is kind of come and gone. They have great games where they shoot really well, and they have other games where they go completely cold. There's really no in between with them. So that's kind of the interesting part. And I thought that game, they just shot horribly. Jack White really, really struggled. Trey just really struggled with the shot. So I think that was the one thing that would concern me about that game, is just kind of the defense in the paint. Now, a lot of that had to do with Zion obviously not being there, but just still 62 points is 62. It's still. Yeah,
it's still a high number. Yeah.
Still a high number. And then just the lack of shooting. Although I thought that game really turned at the end, at that sequence at the end of the first half where, they were down by 8. I think they had the ball twice in a fast break, and they, either turnovers or they just missed shots. And then right at the end there, UNC was able to get an easy basket. And and who knows, maybe if Duke converts there, it's a 6-point or a 5-point game. That completely changes the tide of that game going into the half. But, UNC was able to kind of get their wits about them and score and make that a 10-point lead going into halftime. And I thought that really kind of changed the game. I thought it allowed UNC to kind of catch their breath, because UNC was leaking water there late in the half. I mean, UNC was starting to kind of lose it there. The crowd was getting into it a little bit. I think the players kind of like, okay, they were kind of snapping out of the malaise there a little bit. And that was a big sequence there. It was really was a 4-point swing. That really, really kind of hurt them. And I thought the second half, UNC just did a really good job of just keeping their foot on the gas. So
yeah. And on that, I think there was like maybe 6 or 7 times during the game, especially in that last 4 to 5 minutes of the first half that you mentioned, where we would, against Louisville, when we had our comeback, we started stealing the ball and everything was going our way. Whenever a ball was a 50-50 ball, we would get it. If there was a ball that was thrown into a passing lane, we would grab it and we would go, and we were being able to capitalize on that. It seemed like we were doing that against UNC, but the bounces of the ball, like we tapped the ball to steal it, and it would bounce off 2 guys and land in the hands of a UNC player. And then they would score 5 seconds later, and it just kills everything. Like we had 6 or 7 of those where we had a great rebound, or we had an attempted steal where the ball was just bouncing around, and the luck of the draw 50-50 just landed in the hands of a UNC player, and it killed the momentum that we would get from that good play. So that was definitely something that occurred more and more often during the UNC game. And just kind of every single time we tried to make a run, something would happen, and all of a sudden the lead was 10 again, and you just kind of lost the momentum from there.
Yeah, absolutely. It just kind of felt like that was their stretch. As you've been watching basketball almost your whole life, so you know how this goes. There's moments in games where everything could kind of turn on a dime, and I just kind of felt like right at the end of the half there, it was just our moment there to really make a comeback, to really make a run there, and it just got away from us there. So that was the frustrating part, because I you look at a 16-point victory and you look at the points in the paint, and Cam Johnson and Luke May really had a dominant game, but I don't think UNC really played that well. I thought 2 guys really went off, but UNC didn't really play that well. Kobe White didn't have a great game. They didn't really shoot the ball well from the perimeter. So I think, it's interesting, because when has there ever been a UNC Duke game where the game was actually kind of secondary, or even thirdly? It just kind of felt like Zion's injury, Zion sitting out, Nike and their shoe controversy. And then it was like, oh yeah, Duke and UNC played a game. So I think a lot of the analysis of the game kind of went by the wayside.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it was a typical game in that sense, where, UNC game, I feel like you expect to have, it's still going to be teams shoot 20% from the floor. Everyone's clanging threes. There's turnovers all over the place. Everyone's nervous. And somehow it's like a 4 or 5 point ball game in the end. It happens every time, except for this time. There was one guy who was not in the court, and it was so conspicuous that it overshadowed everything. I think that's just kind of why this game was a little weirder than others.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you like some of the adjustments that they made, especially with yesterday's game in, dealing with life without Zion? They started Alex O'Connell. They sat Jack White. Obviously, they ripped up Joey Baker's red shirt. I thought that was interesting as well. Did you like some of the adjustments that Coach K made going into last night's game?
Let's start with Joey Baker, because that was perplexing to me. To see him appear in the court for to basically end his red shirt was kind of an interesting move. I don't think I've seen him explain why Joey played, but I was talking earlier with my co-hosts on the podcast, and they were, one of them was saying it's basically due to the fact that he might be just tearing it up in practice. And Coach K said, this is your moment. This is your time. We're going to put you in this game. And he didn't come off the bench saying with a look that says, oh my God, what are we doing? He came off determined saying, he knew the game plan. He knew what he was supposed to be doing. He didn't appear that much. He was only in for 5 minutes, but that seemed perplexing to all of us except for the guys on that bench. So I guess in that sense, it's okay. Because as long as they're cool with it, and everyone's on the same page, I don't have a problem with it. Alex O'Connell stepped up in a huge way against Syracuse. 20 points. The 3-point shooting that we've been talking about that's been missing, he had it. The rest of the team didn't, but he did. And that was that was still really good because he came in key moments, had big baskets that either staved off a Syracuse run or allowed us to go on a run of our own, especially early on in the second half. So that was a very welcome change. And with Jack White, he's been struggling lately. There have been games where his defense has been there, and he's blocked a lot of shots, he's grabbed rebounds, and his effort's always there. It's just that he hasn't made a 3-pointer since Florida State, which seems like, how
ages
long ago?
Yeah, ages ago.
Right? So he and it's not like he's taking bad shots. He's taking, open 3-pointers from the corner, from the wing, and they're just not going in. And I don't know what the issue is with them, but I think holding him out yesterday may not necessarily. I know the team has been battling the flu. It's been for the last it seems to be a month and a half. Guys one by one have collected the flu on the team. So maybe he was sick. We don't know. But also maybe it was just a matchup deal where Coach K said we need to have some 3-point shooting, and Jack, you're not it tonight, and that's why offensively you're on the floor. So that might be the issue. But some of the rotations led to some good performances, like in the case of Alex O'Connell.
Yeah, it was a welcome sight. Definitely seeing Alex O'Connell, and I get frustrated with Alex O'Connell because it's man, he'll have those games where he'll shoot the lights out of the ball, and then he'll just go on a 4 or 5 game slump where he just doesn't do anything, and it's just really frustrating because I think he's I think he's an X factor. I really do. I've always liked him, and I've always felt like he's an X factor on this team. He gives us a much needed shooter from the perimeter, a guy that can catch and shoot. He's got a little bit of a playmaking ability as well. So I think they need him, and those two guys are very important, O'Connell and White, because the one criticism that I've had about Coach K, especially in this, this last couple of years with these runs of, these big time recruits is his lack of developing a bench. And I think it's hurt us in some, in a lot of other years. I think it hurt us last year. I think it hurt us a couple years ago. Just a lack of a bench depth, and I think that's definitely important this year because you're going to have games where, especially now that Zion's dealing with this knee issue, even when he comes back, you're going to think that you're not going to, unless he's just totally healthy, obviously, but, you could think that he's going to have some time where he's going to have, get a blow. So Jack White's going to be important. O'Connell's going to be important. They ripped up Joey Baker's red shirt for a reason. So, having him as a playmaker and a shooter and a guy who can kind of get to the rim, that he's going to be important. So I think developing that depth on the bench is going to be very, very important for the rest of the season with this team.
Yeah, and I mean, if you've noticed in previous years, by this point in the season, Duke is down to a 6 or 7 person rotation. Yeah. If you think about it, off the bench, we have Javinder Laurier or Marquise Bolden, whichever one doesn't start. You now have Alex O'Connell, Jack White, Jordan Goldwire didn't play much this week, but has been one of the guys who helped us during the comeback against Louisville, so he's featured. You now have Joey Baker in this rotation. So we're up to, 10 guys, 11 guys, which is very unlike Coach K. What that means is he understands that when one of these freshmen go down, that this team is a different team. And he wants to make sure that everyone is confident going into the tournament, that when called upon, they can shine. Just like Grayson Allen did back in 2015. He was very little used during that season. And then in the last part of the season, Coach K said, the floor is yours, go get him. And on the grandest stage, he lit up the night and helped us win the national championship. Which one of those guys is going to be? Is it going to be, can Alex O'Connell step up in the tournament when we need shooting? Can Jack White get off of, his little slump that he's had? It's not even a little slump at this point. Can, Javinder Laurier and Marquise Bolden continue to provide defense? And can Joey Baker be a guy that can step up when needed and hit a couple of big shots? So these guys now have to learn what it's like to play in these big time environments, because at this point, every game is a big game going forward.
And Goldwire has shown some flashes too. I really like what I've seen from him. He's a tough little defender. Another ball handler out there. He can kind of give Trey a blow here and there. So even Goldwire, he's performed well. I think he had I think he kind of came into the to the center of attention really after that Louisville game where he kind of provided a spark. So I think it's going to be very important to get these guys a fixed role on the team and get them playing well, because I think we're going to definitely need them, especially come tournament time.
Absolutely. And Jordan's defense is going to be something that's needed, especially with the with the pressure defense that he and Trey Jones can put together at stretches, that really frustrates teams and gets us into a little grind where we can, pump out a lot of points in a quick fashion. So I think that's going to be something to watch as we move forward some of these matchups. But really, when it comes down to it, the 3-point shooting, we have 3-point shooting, we have great rebounding, we have excellent defense, we have excellent inside the paint presence. If one of those falters, we need something to step up. If we are, don't have the defensive effort, then we need to step up with 3-pointers. If we don't have 3-pointers, we have to step up in every other arena to really be a successful basketball team. And all of these guys play a key factor in one or more of those areas. So I think that's really the key. If these guys can, develop and make sure that they're ready come tournament time, we're going to be the best team in the country, and we're going to be a team that no one wants to face, because even when one of the shooters that start is not having a good night, they're going to have to fear someone coming off the bench and ruining their day.
Absolutely. Where were you early in this year, in the off season and coming into this season, where I don't know how much you follow high school ball, but how high were you on these recruits coming in? Obviously you hear all the buzz and the hype, and, I don't know how much did you get to watch all of them play individually in high school or kind of follow their track. But were you super excited that these guys kind of, exceed the expectations that you had going in for them coming into the season? Yeah.
So usually for high school recruiting, I don't really follow it as much until they're in the final stages. Like, I know the big recruits, I know how they play. I used to watch them play a lot, but it's tricky, right? When you're a huge supporter of the team, when you start following guys on Twitter or just like commenting on different players, I never wanted to be misconstrued that I'm a booster or anything like that, even though I am very much not. But as an alum, we technically all are. So I'm always careful of that. But when it comes to like Zion Williamson, obviously I had seen the YouTube highlights. I had known about him since he was in 8th grade. And following his high school career and just the YouTube sensation that he was, I did not know that he was just Thanos in real life when it comes to the rest of his game. So I mean, yeah, everyone when you're looking on YouTube at some of these highlights, even RJ Barrett, I had seen him play for Team Canada. And that was when I got to see, wow, this guy's a very well-rounded player that can really be a good addition for us. Cam Reddish, I knew he could shoot well, but I didn't know Zion could do anything other than, dunk very well. And that is really where YouTube kind of failed everybody, is because they kind of said, oh, this guy's just a dunker. He's very much not. He's one of the best players I've ever seen in college basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been impressed with him too, his overall game, and even his shot. A lot of people make a lot of issue about his shooting, but I don't think his shot is broken. I don't think his shooting is an issue as much as people make it out to be. I think he's got a good form. I think he's got the ability to become a very good shooter in the next level, at the next level. So, even the shooting, which is, I think a lot of people make a lot to do about nothing with, I don't think he attempts a lot of shots from the perimeter, but when he does, I don't think he's looked awful doing it. I think he's only shooting 29% from the field or from three, but I think he's only had maybe 5 or 6 or 7 attempts. So it's very, very small sample size. I've been immensely impressed with Zion. The guy that has shocked me and how good he is Trey. Like I knew Trey had the ability. Obviously, he's got the pedigree, but how good he is, especially defensively. I mean, oh my God, the guy is a monster defensively. I mean, he just plays the passing so well. He's a good on-ball defender, a good help defender as well. I mean, he's got an ability to be, an all NBA defender at the next level if he continues to develop.
When it comes to Trey, it's a special situation because we knew who his brother was. Tyus is a legend in Duke circles for what he did back in 2015. So when someone says, "Hey, Trey is basically Tyus but better on defense," we were basically like, "Okay, cool. We're winning every basketball game because Tyus was that good in college." And with Trey, he has been that way on defense. I think when it comes to the next level, his defense is going to keep him in ball games. He's going to have to improve on his shooting, his perimeter shooting, which, I mean, if you're a point guard, he's also a great passer. I mean, his assist to turnover ratio is one of the best in college basketball history right now. So that is something that he will have no problem, being on a team where someone's like, hey, we have a bunch of stars, just pass the ball to him and get out of the way. But when it comes to being on the court in the next level, he's going to have to improve on his shooting. That's going to be his perimeter shooting, especially. He's good inside. He can drive the lane. He can dish. He can play defense. That's the last part of his game that needs to round out. And he's had a struggle of it this year, but there's definitely been times where if you leave him open, just like you said with Zion, his form is pure. Some of these baskets are going to go in. And if Trey starts hitting threes, then that's just going to take the pressure off of everybody else.
Yeah.
Especially Cam and RJ on the perimeter. If Trey starts hitting threes, the teams are just going to freak out because they're going to that's the last guy on the floor that can hit threes. If he's hitting them, then we're pretty much screwed. So that's what Trey brings to the table. And really, we found out when he got injured that he is the most valuable player on the team, because without him, our defense is shot, and that is a big, big deal. Especially when you get into the postseason.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was also before kind of Goldwire kind of stepped up and showed his value to this team. I mean, remember, when he went out, they had RJ playing the point. So, he's the most important player on the team. Absolutely. I think obviously Zion, you could argue Zion or RJ as being the most important or the best, but, Trey is definitely the most important player. He makes us go. He takes us to another level. But I've always said this, even this year, that I thought the X factor to this team was going to be Cam Reddish. And it's interesting because Cam kind of struggled the first third of the year, kind of struggled with his role on the team, because really, he's a guy that was used to being the man in high school. And now he comes into a situation where he's the third option. In a lot of situations, he was put in a role where he was kind of a spot up shooter. So he really had to kind of adjust his game. And that happens a lot when you have these team ups of a lot of great players. There's always going to be someone that has to kind of, alter their game and alter their role of sorts. So I think that guy was Cam but I really like the way he's played over the last month or so, really over the last couple games, really since kind of the Louisville comeback, where he's really kind of taken his game to the next level. And if he continues to play like this, I really think we're unbeatable.
Yeah. And you have to also recall Florida State. I mean, not only won the game
absolutely.
for us, but he was great throughout that game. So that is, you're right. When he shoots well, we play well. When he shoots poorly, we have to figure out another way to win. And when he's efficient, I mean, the other night against UNC, he not only was shooting the ball pretty decently, but he was efficient in doing it. He wasn't taking terrible shots. He wasn't trying to force anything. And he was getting to the rim as well as shooting a couple of threes. So I appreciate that. And when he can do that, that's when we see the player that we thought we were getting in, the number 2 recruit in the country. If you remember, RJ was number 1, Cam was number 2, and Zion was number 3 in this class. So, I mean, they're all proving their worth, but, with Cam, especially, if he can hit threes, again, the last, area of where we need to improve. If we're hitting threes, we are killing everybody in college basketball, because no one can stop us if we can do that.
Of all the teams that you've seen play this year, and I assume you watch a lot of college basketball outside of Duke as well, what's the one team that would concern you come tournament time? What's the one team that you think that, can kind of give Duke a run? And it doesn't have to just be one team, it could be multiple, but what's the one or two teams that you really would concern yourself with if you're a Duke fan that, like, okay, this team is going to be tough to take out?
I think, Kentucky improving as they have is not necessarily cause for concern, but it's definitely something to watch out for, because, we beat them by 38 in the first game of the season, but very rarely do you get a second crack and do the exact same thing. So, even with UVA, we've played them twice. I expect to play them in the ACC tournament. If both teams perform the way they're supposed to, we're going to see them in the semifinal or the final. Absolutely. So those type of teams are always tough outs. And Gonzaga hasn't gone anywhere, since they beat us. They've just been performing steadily. Of course, they're on the West Coast and people don't really talk about them. But they're still a really good basketball team, and they're the only team that's really beat us at full strength. So they obviously, of course it took them shooting like 98% from everything to beat us. But I think those sort of teams are teams that when you get to it, they're going to be here in the end, and we have to figure out ways to beat these teams. The ACC is a great primer for the NCAA tournament. We are facing a great team every single game in and out of this conference, and everyone is playing each other. Everyone's beating each other, and this team, this conference is very strong. And for us to, I think we want to be able to win the ACC. We haven't done that since 2011. We want to win the ACC tournament. We haven't done that in a long time. I think Coach K really wants us, this team, to be able to put not one banner up, but multiple banners. And included in that would be winning the best conference in America, both in the regular season and in the tournament. That would be quite an accomplishment for this young group of players. And I think that's something that Coach K is really, really trying to do and bring home.
Yeah, absolutely. The one team I'm with you, Gonzaga really scares me because Gonzaga matches up with us from a size perspective. And I think they also have the shooting that could affect us in a big spot. I'm not as worried about UVA as you are, just because the issue that I have with UVA sometimes is that I don't, although they're better this year, and from what I've seen, they're better. I still think in a big spot, they still struggle to score way too much for me. You know, they still are one of those teams that in a big spot, in a big moment where they need a shot, where they need a guy to take over, sometimes I think they still kind of go cold from that department. So, you know, that's the one thing that would, you know, that's the one area to me that I think it's stopping them from going to the next level. You know, Kentucky, I like Kentucky, but I'm not as concerned with Kentucky, although they have played well. PJ Washington's really come on and become a National Player of the Year candidate. So Kentucky, I mean, I think Kentucky's always in the mix. Tennessee's size would concern me because, you know, just their physicality, but Tennessee just struggles from the field too much. You know, they just don't have a lot of offense, and, you know, and I think to beat Duke, you're going to have to match up with their athleticism and their size. And I think that you're going to have to beat them on offense. You know, you're not going to slow down Duke defensively most times than not. You're going to have to score to beat us. And those are the teams that would concern me. Gonzaga would concern me. Honestly, I really believe that I think it's going to be a battle between Gonzaga, Duke, and I would say Michigan for who wins the national championship right now. For me,
yeah, Michigan's a great team. Michigan State has also been good for a lot of the season, but both teams have struggled lately, and it's been kind of perplexing. And if you're a fan of either school, because they're doing it against teams that they should be destroying, and they're just very much not. I wonder if it's something about the motivation, or if it's something about just the fact that something's off. I haven't really paid as much attention to them as I have in previous years, but I think when it comes to especially Michigan definitely has the players that can run, make another run like they did last year. But for them, they need to be able to play defense, and when because sometimes they just take nights off, and early in the season, they were able to ride that to some victories and still be able to compensate for that. But lately they just haven't been. But as the games get, closer to March, these games get, bigger and bigger. And they're playing right now against Michigan State. Will they be able to play defense against some of these teams when it counts?
Yeah. Just wanted to get into you, and you mentioned that you're a Duke alum. Just share your time at Duke, just everything that you kind of experienced and dealt with. Just talk about life at Duke, because it's very rarely that you get a guy that actually has gone to Duke, knows the life, knows the culture, has been around the basketball program, has been around the football program. Just kind of talk to me about your whole experience as a whole at Duke, and just kind of everything that you learned and just the overall experience of it.
It was great. I loved every second of it. My best friends were people I went to school with, that I lived with, that I interacted with. I am part of the greatest class in Duke basketball, in not just Duke basketball history, in Duke history, the class of 2004. I dare anybody out there to challenge me on that, because they will be absolutely wrong. Oquad is the best, and we have our 15-year reunion, so I want to give them a special shout out for that.
Go ahead, shout them out, man. Shout them out.
Yeah, those are my people, Oquad. But I think, being at Duke is more, I'll give you a background of a story that I tell people about, going to Duke and how I ended up going to Duke. I got into Michigan, and growing up, I was trained to go to Michigan. I was bred a Michigan fan. My first sporting event was a Michigan football game. I was very much in that circle. And going to Michigan was a dream of mine. And I got in full scholarship, and my dad was basically like, my son's in college. You got a full scholarship. This college process is over. We did it. We made it. And I applied to Duke after visiting. My parents, my mom and my brother and I took a trip and visited like 10 different colleges in the East, because that's basically where we went to end up. And we visited Duke and UNC, and my mom was basically like, you're not applying to both, pick one. And when I visited Duke's campus, it was so beautiful. The courses they offered were great. Obviously, it's one of the best schools in the country. At the time, I think it was second or third in U.S. News rankings. And, so obviously I was like, this is a good school. If I get in, it has the balance of being an excellent academic school and excellent at sports, and something to kind of latch onto. So I applied to Duke. I had already got into Michigan, and I finally got into Duke. So my dad was like, that's fine. You're still going to Michigan. And so they have an admitted program, where admitted students could come down and see the campus, and take a look before they make their final decisions. And so I went down, and I joke with my dad sometimes that the worst mistake he's ever made is that he sent my mom with me down to this they call Blue Devil Days, and not him coming himself, because I fell in love with the school that weekend. I absolutely loved everything about it. I had dreams of, instead of dreams of going to Michigan Stadium, I had dreams of walking into Cameron Indoor Stadium. And as I left, my mom asked if this was the place I wanted to be, and I unequivocally said yes without hesitation. And we dropped off the admittance deposit before we left, because we knew if I had gotten home, my dad would try to talk me out of it. So I had the nice news of going home and telling my dad that he was now a Blue Devil, because his money was sitting in the overnight deposit box at Duke admission. So I joke with that because, not only I say that because Duke has become our family. My dad and my mom watch Duke games. Sometimes they're trying to beat me to it. They're always asking me about Duke games, or we're always talking basketball. My dad watches, I get my sports fandom from him. And we talk sports all the time, but we talk about Duke basketball all the time. And that is become our life. And meeting some of the people that they have there, some of the nicest people, some of the smartest people you will ever meet, exist on this campus. A lot of the things that go on in this world probably have a Blue Devil behind it somewhere, grinding the wheels so that this thing that becomes so natural to us can happen. And I really appreciate every minute of it. I go back to Durham often. Being in DC, I'm only 4 hours away, so it's easy to drive down for basketball and football games. And mind you, I worked on the football team. I was a video assistant, and we did not win a single solitary game my first 2 years. That is a lot of stupid film that I had to edit and really ask coaches if they actually wanted to see it. And thankfully they want to see every second of it. But now that they're a decent program, with Cutcliffe at the helm, we've gone to new heights of things of we would never thought we would have seen when I first stepped foot. And that first football game, I still remember it vividly, being just pummeled by ECU, to now the first football game of next season. We're going to be in Atlanta facing Alabama. And no one's saying that we're going to get blown out. They're saying that we have a chance in that game, and which is astounding to me. So that sort of tying into that, being invested in that, and just really supporting that from near and far, has been something that's been a dream since I've been here. And the new dream has become a reality, and it's come true. And I think that is what a lot of people who go to Duke will tell you, is that Duke is just the Gothic. We call it the Gothic Wonderland for a reason, because when you're there, it feels like that. But when you leave, you can't wait to go back. You can't wait to relive that every single time you step foot on that campus. So I'm going back next weekend when Duke takes on Miami. I also ironically went to Miami for law school. So my Miami friends will be talking a lot of crap that weekend, but there's no place I'd rather be is back on Duke's campus to watch that team play and really just relive my college experience every single time I'm down.
Yeah, I saw that you went to Miami. So how was the experience with that? Just kind of compare the two. Miami obviously having the legacy of being a great football school and everything, the tradition that they've established there, and then obviously Duke being the powerhouse that it is with basketball. Just kind of compare the two universities. A lot of people have mentioned that Miami's kind of the Harvard of the South or the Duke of the South. Depends on who you're talking to, but Miami's a kind of a similar school academically and just kind of everything that they have to offer. So just compare the life and the two schools and both experiences there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's when I considered Miami, I found a lot of qualities that I loved about Duke in Miami, and that's why I ended up going there. From the small campus, like people don't realize that with Duke and Miami, both these schools are about 15,000 undergrads, which is very, very small when it comes to Division I athletics. I mean, you're talking about, Michigan, on the other hand, is like 40,000 right. undergraduates. And these two schools have like 15,000 total students at the school. So I found that to be great. Obviously, being in Miami, people think about what they do in spring break. Just imagine that for 3 years. But also you have to go to school on top of it. I learned a lot at Miami. I have a lot of great friends in Miami. Some of my best friends, my closest friends, are people I chat with every day, are people who went to Miami with me for law school. I ended up wanting to move back. I missed seasons. I'm from outside Detroit. I like snow. Miami gets zero of it. So, I wanted to move back north. And that's how I ended up in DC. But while I was down there, I loved the school. I kind of grew tired of being, you kind of have to be on call, in a sense when you're in Miami, because whenever anyone visits, as I'm sure if you've been to Miami, you go down, you want to go hard. But you're going hard for 3 days and you're leaving. Yeah. And for me, it was just a constant constant rotation of 3 day, people coming down for 3 days and wanting to just go hard the entire time. And the only constant was me. So, that turns out to be tiring in a while, but I loved Miami. I enjoyed living there. I thought it was a good experience. I love going back. I still have friends down there. I go down to visit, I try to go down once a year to visit. So it's definitely a place where I get to go back and do the things that all my friends bestowed upon me when they came to visit me when I lived down there, which is to party hard for a few days and really take in Miami for what it is. So I definitely missed the school. The school was great, and it definitely was something that I considered in part based on my Duke experience, and I got basically a similar experience out of it.
Awesome. And talk to me a little bit about your time with the Duke football program. Obviously, Duke notoriously for a long time, as long as I can remember until recently, Duke was kind of a laughingstock as far as football. It's interesting because you look at the heights of the basketball program and then you compare it to Duke football. And I've always kind of felt like Duke football's had the opportunity, or at least the potential, to be better than what it was. And of course you could say that about any program, but I've always kind of felt like Duke had that potential to be that. So just talk to me about kind of the growing pains. You've seen it firsthand, just being a part of that football program to seeing where it is now. Just kind of talk to me about that whole situation.
I say this without hesitation. There is no team that I am more proud of than the Duke University football team. That team, from, again, like I said, my first football game was a 38-0 blasting by ECU. In a monsoon in the heart of August, where it was 90 degrees, muggy, and a hurricane was barreling down on us, like that sort of rain. And on top of that, we had to watch them just get absolutely destroyed by a team that should not have been on the same field as us. And to go from there to, again, trying to make plans to go to Atlanta to watch my team play Alabama to open up college football is nothing short of a miracle to me. Being on the team, I was the video guy, so I recorded practices. I helped. I didn't record games, but I helped run the tapes between the cameramen and the cutting room so that they could be edited. And I helped with the editing process for the practices as well as the games, so that the coaches could look at it afterwards. And it was back when the systems were first coming into play, where you could, call up different plays by name, and you could see how that was running practice, how it was running games, and see all the sets and see what was different. And you can use that to help guide your team. Obviously for the first 2 years, it did not work, because we didn't win a game. But now with Coach Cutcliffe, he's really turned this program around. He has he's made everyone a believer, and where I used to beg friends to come to football games, I don't have to do that anymore. People want to go to the games. Students want to go to the games. And when you see such a turnaround like that, it really makes you smile. The one thing I will also note is that a lot of times when you see a program make a turnaround like that, you see some of the older players, the players that were part of that disastrous part,
right.
They a little hint of jealousy at the fact that these new kids, quote, got it so good. I don't see that with former Duke players who have been through the program. They are just as excited as I am, if not happier, about the success that we are having as a football program right now. The bowl games are still things that we don't take for granted. We've gone, 5 of the last 6 years. We've won the last last 3 bowl games that we've been in. And those sort of things are still things we don't take for granted. We celebrate them like some teams celebrate conference titles. When we made that conference title game in 2013, I was on top of the world. You could not tell me nothing. But at the same time, you couldn't tell the players anything either. Those former players, so many of those guys were just over the moon at the fact that they were part of something that even, when their coaches back in the day were telling them, yes, this is a struggle, but we're building something. We're building something. And to see that pay off, even if it was by players that they weren't able to directly be responsible for it, they all felt like they played a part in it. And I think that's the most endearing thing about Coach Cutcliffe's staff and the program that he's built, is that he does not shy away from the past. He embraces it. He brings those players in. He keeps them in the fold, and he makes them feel a part of something special that is brewing right now. And I think that is the best endearing quality about this program and why I love it so much.
Dope, man. That's really dope. Did you get to interact much with, I'm sure you probably got to interact a lot with Coach Cutcliffe, but did you interact much with Coach K in your time there? How approachable is he? How kind of involved? Because, I know, a lot of programs, the coach is there, but he's not really a part of the community or a part of the life on campus. But, how involved is Coach K in everyday life, and just kind of how approachable is he? Just kind of, just give me a little rundown on Coach K.
Yeah, I got to meet with him a few times, and I never got to go up to Schwartzbutter's. I actually did once, but I never got to meet with him in his office. But he, when I was the mayor of Sheshevskyville, we called the headline monitor, but you basically is the guy who runs Tent City outside for the DQNC game. I was fortunate enough to do that my senior year. Still easily the greatest achievement I did at Duke. I did nothing else other than if I did nothing else, that was the one thing I will put on my resume for life, that I led that. But, he was very involved in that, in the sense that he came up to me the day I got, elected or got selected to run it, and basically said, whatever you need from me, let me know. And I'm thinking, okay, cool, whatever. That's I appreciate that, coach, but he has bigger fish to fry. He's trying to run a basketball team. He's not trying to worry about what, 1,300, Duke students are doing out in the cold from time to time, but he did care. He would come by, and there'd be times where I'd be out in Sheshevskyville and just kind of hanging out and overseeing everything. And he would sneak up on me. He'd tap me on the shoulder and be like, hey, what do you guys need anything? Is everything good? Give me an update. He was very concerned about the not just the health of the students, but also the psyche, the whole, he was worried. He wanted to make sure that everyone was having fun. He wanted to make sure that people were excited about the game. And obviously, when you look at Kville, you see a whole thing of tents ready for one game. You note the excitement. And he was able to come out and from time to time, he would confide in me and say, hey, I got pizza. I'm going to send. Do you think I should come out and say something? Do you think we should send the guys out? And, he would give us whatever we needed to make sure that we were ready on the day of the UNC game to support our team with all the breath in our body. And that is, and it's not just me that has said that. A lot of, people over the years have talked about the generosity that he has and the time that he spends on things that are not dealing with basketball, to make sure that life on campus is great. And I think that is, one of the best things about Coach K, the man, that people don't get to see, that he is someone that really genuinely cares about student life, and is willing to do things that need to be done to help keep kids happy. So I appreciated him for that. He really helped me out when I was in charge. And I know he's helped out other headline monitors since.
Awesome. So, all right, we're going to get to the rapid fire portion of this.
Okay.
So, here, we'll start with this. What's the best Duke game that you've attended to in person ever?
The best Duke game I've attended in person. It's not. I'm sorry, this is not rapid fire, but this is a great story. In the end, this was the last game of my senior year against UNC. The game that I've been talking about. Donald Trump happened to be there, and we share a name, a first name. And a group of students they had pointed him out. He was standing about 10 feet away from me, and a group of kids started chanting, "Our Donald's better," and pointing at me. And he got about, say, maybe a third of the section to do that. That is easily the greatest cheer I've ever heard. I think those kids don't realize how much that meant at the time and how much it still means, given situations. But it's definitely to see Trump's face looking at, like, who is this other Donald? And I'm looking back at him as to say, sorry, bro, you're in my house. There's nothing better than that. So that last game, and obviously going out, beating UNC in your final game as a senior in Cameron, there's nothing better than that. And there never will be.
Awesome. What's the best arena to visit outside of course, Cameron in the ACC?
Ooh, that's a great question. And the funny thing is, I haven't been to a lot of road games for basketball.
Oh, you haven't? Oh, okay.
I have been to. I mean, I have been to the Comcast Center. I will say that was my favorite game outside of Duke. But I will say this: no, that's not my favorite game. My favorite game is the only game I went to at the Dean Dome, which was my senior year. That was when Duhan had the running under the basket layup to win the game in overtime. I was at that game sitting in the booster club for the UNC boosters because my friend was a Duke graduate and worked in the ticket office and got me a last minute ticket. So that was the best game. But I will say that the fans at I've always heard the fans at UVA at John Paul Jones Arena are always really nice and really cool. And I've always wanted to check out a game there. So I would say for those for that game, I'd want to go down to visit JPJ for a game. That's probably number one on my list.
Awesome. And just talk to me real quick before we go about kind of Tobacco Road and 3 schools, 8 miles apart, that whole thing. I've always kind of found that story and just kind of everything just being really cool, just to think about those two just behemoths just being that close to each other. And just talk to me, because I've heard other interviews with other people that have been to Duke and have been to both schools, and they talk about how Duke is kind of that small pocket of Durham, and then everything else in the entire state is UNC. Did you see it that way, just being there for 4 years? And just where does Wake kind of fall into things? Because I know Wake's kind of fallen on hard times the last few years, but there was a time where Wake was a premier school for basketball as well. So just kind of talk to me about those 3 schools and the relationship in the community between the 3 schools. Yeah,
so it's like the triangle is interesting in the sense that, yes, it's dominated by 2 teams, but a third lives there and a fourth used to. So it's like living in a house where 2 guys are arguing about whose house it is. And that's Duke and UNC, and NC State's like, hey guys, I know we're in Raleigh, but we live here too. And Wake Forest chimes in with like, hey, we used to live here, so we have some say in this too. And it's really just that back and forth, that really makes the triangle a special place when it comes to sports, much less college basketball. To have 2 huge rivals, the greatest rivalry in college sports, in my opinion, to have them 8 miles apart is a very unique thing, and to also have a third school that's 10 miles away from that. And all 3 of them back in the day were fighting for ACC and national championships every single year. And then you throw in Wake Forest, who is not very far. It's only an hour and a half away. But they also, those 4 schools really have embodied the ACC, and really the rivalries that present between the 4 schools are things that have really shaped college basketball over the years. And we've had some really good matchups between these 2 teams, not just Duke and UNC, but NC State, Duke, Duke, Wake. We've had some great games between the four schools. And I think that the proximity like ties itself into how great those rivalries are. And I know a lot of the other rivalries get kind of overshadowed by Duke UNC, but they are all strong rivalries in their own right, and it makes for a great conference and really makes for great basketball.
I thought of another question to ask you before you go.
Okay.
Of all the opposing fans that you've dealt with, which of our rivals, of course, what's the best one in your opinion to deal with? But who are the ones that like, okay, I hate you guys, I hate your teams, but you guys are not that bad.
Oh, so I'd say the best rivalry fans would definitely be NC State. NC State kind of, I wouldn't say I hate NC State, but I definitely want to beat them every time. They're one of our rivals. And when we talk with NC State fans, they're very knowledgeable. They know the game. But we all at the end, whether we, disagree on who's going to win when it's Duke, NC State, we are united in our hatred for UNC. And sometimes the debate is who hates UNC more, Duke or NC State fans. So they're always a lot of fun. And when we play each other, the banter is usually jovial. But at the end of the night, whoever wins, there may be some bragging, but we quickly unite in saying, go to hell, Carolina, go to hell.
Amazing. Well, it was a pleasure having you on, my man. Appreciate the time that you've given us today. Before you go, please take this time to plug your podcast, all the work you do on SB Nation, Stars and Stripes, everything. Go ahead. Just use this time to plug and tell people where they can find you, man.
Sure. On Twitter, you can find me at BlazinDW, BLAZINDW. You can also subscribe to the Duke Basketball Report podcast. As you mentioned, we are on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, and SoundCloud. I also write at dbr.com. We have a great forum section, a robust one that not just talks about Duke. We talk about other ACC sports and just college basketball in general. So feel free to check that out, dukebasketballreport.com. And on the soccer side, you can catch me. I am the co-manager of starsandstripesfc.com and also write for blackandredunited.com. So I'm all over the place, mainly basketball and soccer, but really in anything when it comes to soccer or when it comes to sports in general. You'll probably find me with some opinion on it and really trying to branch out into it. So I appreciate your time. I thank you for supporting the podcast that we have. Definitely looking forward to hearing more from you as this podcast takes off, and appreciate the time and talking with you.
No, absolutely. And keep up the good work you guys are doing over there. I'm a huge fan of all three of you guys and the work that you guys do. It's as a Duke basketball fan, it's definitely a must listen every week to listen to the podcast. So we thank you. I think I can speak for all the Duke fans out there. We definitely thank you guys for the work and the time you guys put into it. It's a great show. And thank you for being here. And hopefully we can get you back on at the end of the year when we're celebrating, hopefully, a national championship.
Ooh, boy. I'll hold you to that. Your lips to God's ears. So,
hey, man, definitely.
We went. I'll be back.
Let's do it. All right, man. Thank you for joining us on the show. Okay.
All right. Appreciate it.
That's going to do it for this week's episode of the podcast. Thanks again to Donald for joining me. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at BlazingDW. Make sure you listen and subscribe to his podcast, the Duke Basketball Report podcast, which is available anywhere where you can find podcasts for free. Follow us on Twitter at AGS Pod, on Instagram at AGS Podcast, and then, of course, on Facebook at Any Given Sunday. Follow me on Twitter at TheManuelBrown, on Instagram at TheManuelBrown, and, of course, Snapchat, MannyBro15. As always, I'd like to thank the audience for listening and subscribing. If you like what you're listening to, please drop us a review on iTunes. We need those reviews as much as we can. And thank you for listening and subscribing to the show each and every week. Without you guys, there is no podcast. Make sure you catch us next week for another episode of the podcast. Until then, I am your host, Manny Brown. Have a happy, safe, blessed rest of your week. I am out of here. Peace. Serious.